My girlfriend vanished for 3 days with her ex, thinking I'd wait around like some backup plan. What she didn't expect was coming home to find I'd packed up, moved out, and started building a life she'd never be invited into again. I'm Lucas, 29, and I work as an aerospace engineer for a defense contractor here in Nashville, pulling down $87,000 a year after 6 solid years with the same company. I've got my own townhouse in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but it's mine, and I've worked hard to build something stable. Samantha and I met 4 years ago at a rock climbing gym downtown when she needed help with a route she'd been struggling with. She was this energetic event planner, 26, with this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. We clicked immediately over our shared love of adventure and music, spending our first few dates exploring Nashville's honky-tonk scene and hiking the trails around the city. 2 years ago, she suggested we move in together to save money, which made financial sense even though I noticed she only contributed to groceries while I handled the mortgage, utilities, and everything else. I didn't mind because she seemed genuinely happy, and we were making plans for the future, talking about traveling through Europe together, maybe even buying a bigger place someday. We had this comfortable routine of weekend climbing sessions, trying new restaurants, and just enjoying each other's company. My father, a retired military officer who'd seen his brother lose everything in a messy separation, had warned me early on about protecting what I'd built. "Son," he'd said over beers one evening, "make sure you're with someone who adds to your life, not someone who just enjoys the life you've already created." I thought I had that with Samantha, but looking back, I realized I was doing most of the adding while she was doing most of the enjoying. The first time Samantha mentioned David, I was replacing a faulty sensor on a satellite communication array at work, completely focused on the technical specs, when she called during my lunch break. "Oh, you'll never guess who's back in town," she said with this excitement I hadn't heard in her voice for months. "David from high school opened this amazing craft brewery downtown, and he wants to catch up." What struck me as odd was that in 4 years together, through countless conversations about our pasts, our families, our dreams, she had never once mentioned anyone named David. Not during late-night talks about her teenage years, not when we drove past her old high school, not even when she showed me her yearbook photos. It was like this person had been completely erased from her personal history until the moment he reappeared. Within a week, David dominated every conversation. David thinks Nashville's music scene is getting too commercialized. David's brewery concept is so innovative, nothing like the corporate beer industry. David says I should consider event planning for smaller, more artistic venues. I started wondering who exactly I was dating because this David character seemed to have more influence over her opinions than 4 years of our shared experiences. The really disturbing part was watching her take him to all our special places around the city. The Honky Tonk Bar on Broadway where we'd had our third date, where the bartenders still remembered our usual drinks. The hiking trails at Radnor Lake where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings talking about everything and nothing. Even our coffee shop in Music Row where we'd sit for hours people watching and planning weekend adventures. She was systematically showing him the life we'd built together, like she was giving him a tour of what could be his if he wanted it. My best friend Gary, a fellow engineer who'd known me since college, noticed the change immediately during our weekly pool games at Murphy's Pub. "Dude, she's mentioned this David guy 12 times in the last hour," he said, lining up his shot. "In 4 years, you've never heard his name, and now suddenly he's the most fascinating person in Nashville?" Gary had this way of cutting through nonsense with engineering precision. I've seen this pattern before with my cousin's ex-wife. First comes the constant mentions, then the comparisons, then the "he's just a friend" phase, and finally the "I need space to figure things out" conversation. I laughed it off, telling Gary he was being paranoid, that Samantha was just being helpful to an old friend who was new to the city. "She's got a good heart," I said, chalking my cue. "She's always been the type to help people get settled." But even as I defended her, something cold was settling in my stomach because deep down, I knew Gary's pattern recognition was usually spot on. Within 2 weeks of David's grand return, Samantha transformed into someone I barely recognized. Her phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter during dinner, was now permanently glued to her hand, screen angled away from me like she was guarding state secrets. When I'd ask who she was texting, she'd give me these vague responses about work stuff or client communications, but her event planning business had never required this level of late-night digital attention before. She started dressing differently too, trading her comfortable jeans and climbing gear for tight dresses and heels, claiming she needed to network better and elevate her professional image. The woman who used to throw on workout clothes and head to the climbing gym without a second thought was now spending an hour getting ready for what she claimed were client meetings. Our physical intimacy disappeared completely, like someone had flipped a switch. When I'd reach for her in bed, she'd mumble about being tired from work or having an early meeting, then roll away to scroll through her phone. The woman who used to initiate as much as I did suddenly acted like my touch was an inconvenience. She became hostile over the smallest things: dishes left in the sink for an hour, my choice to watch a documentary instead of whatever reality show she preferred. Even the way I loaded the dishwasher became grounds for criticism. "You never put any effort into anything," she'd snap when I'd suggest staying in for the evening. Some people actually try to make their lives interesting. Our weekend climbing sessions, which had been sacred to us for 4 years, suddenly became impossible to schedule. "I'm swamped with new clients," she'd say, then spend Saturday afternoon getting her nails done and Sunday brunching with friends whose names I'd never heard before. Meanwhile, she couldn't stop praising David's entrepreneurial spirit and business acumen. "He's so driven, so focused on building something meaningful," she'd say while I worked on my laptop, analyzing trajectory calculations for a satellite launch. "It's inspiring to be around someone who thinks so big." The irony wasn't lost on me that I was literally helping launch objects into space while she found my career boring compared to someone who served craft beer. I realized she was essentially replacing me emotionally while still living in my house, enjoying the stability I provided while investing her energy and attention elsewhere. It was like watching someone slowly move out without actually packing their bags. The breaking point came on a Tuesday after I'd spent 14 hours troubleshooting a critical satellite communication system malfunction that had our entire team scrambling. The Department of Defense was breathing down our necks because this particular satellite handled encrypted military communications, and any downtime meant potential security vulnerabilities. I'd finally isolated the problem to a corrupted firmware update and managed to restore full functionality by 9 p.m., feeling that exhausted satisfaction that comes from solving something that really matters. All I wanted was to come home, grab a beer, and decompress with Samantha, maybe tell her about the technical challenge I'd overcome. Instead, I found a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter: "Client dinner ran late, don't wait up." No details, no estimated return time, no response to my text asking where she was. I heated up leftover pizza and tried to focus on a documentary about Mars rover technology, but I kept checking my phone and listening for her car in the driveway. At 1:30 a.m., I heard her fumbling with the front door lock, clearly intoxicated, makeup smeared, dress wrinkled like she'd been somewhere much more casual than any business dinner I'd ever attended. "How was your client dinner?" I asked, standing in the kitchen doorway as she kicked off her heels with obvious relief. She froze like I'd caught her stealing something. "It was fine. Good networking opportunity." "Which client?" The Morrison wedding. Big budget event." She was avoiding eye contact, focusing intently on her purse like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Morrison wedding is in 3 months, Samantha. Why are you meeting about it at midnight on a Tuesday?" Her expression shifted from nervous to defensive in seconds. "God, Lucas, what is this, an interrogation? I'm building my business, trying to create something meaningful, and you're acting like some controlling boyfriend who needs to monitor my every move." I'm asking where my girlfriend was until 1:30 a.m. when she said she'd be at a business dinner. "I was with David, okay? Happy now?" He introduced me to some potential clients at his brewery. It turned into a group thing. The way she said David's name, with this protective tenderness, told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a text message. I wasn't planning to look, but the preview showed on the locked screen. "Last night was incredible, can't wait to do it again." When she came out, hair wrapped in my towel, I held up her phone. "Want to explain this?" She snatched it away like I'd violated some sacred trust. You went through my phone? Are you kidding me right now? It was right there, Samantha. The preview showed when it buzzed. That doesn't give you the right to invade my privacy. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're paranoid and controlling and you don't trust me. She was screaming now, throwing clothes into a bag with shaking hands. Maybe I need some space to figure out what I actually want. Take all the space you need, I said quietly. She stormed out before I could say another word. I was installing new speakers in my garage workshop Saturday afternoon, trying to lose myself in the precise work of running cables and calibrating audio levels, when my phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. Staying with David for a few days to figure things out. Need space to think about our relationship and what I really want. I read it twice, then set my phone down and went back to connecting the crossover components. No anger, no desperation, just this calm clarity settling over me like I'd finally received confirmation of something I'd already known. My father called an hour later, his weekly check-in that had become routine since my mother passed 3 years ago. "How are things with Samantha?" he asked, and something in my voice when I explained the situation made him go quiet for a long moment. "Son, here's what I learned in 35 years of marriage to your mother, and what I wish I'd told your uncle before his divorce," he said with that measured tone he used for important conversations. When someone asks for space to figure out if they want to be with you, they've already figured it out. They're just hoping you'll make the decision easier by chasing after them or giving them an excuse to blame you. He paused, and I could hear him sipping his coffee in the kitchen where he still kept Mom's favorite mug on the counter. "Give her all the space she wants, Lucas. Never chase someone who's already chosen to leave. And whatever you do, don't be there when she decides the grass wasn't greener and tries to come back." I didn't respond to Samantha's text. Instead, I pulled up the contact information for Seattle Aerospace Solutions, the company that had recruited me aggressively 6 months ago with an offer I declined because of my relationship. The recruiter, Jennifer Walsh, had told me the position would stay open if I ever reconsidered, and their offer of $105,000 plus relocation assistance had been tempting even when I was committed to staying in Nashville. I sent her an email Sunday evening explaining that my circumstances had changed and asking if the opportunity was still available. She responded within 2 hours, clearly excited to hear from me again. "Lucas, perfect timing. We just secured a major NASA contract for next-generation satellite communications. Can you do a video interview Tuesday afternoon?" The irony was perfect. While Samantha was off exploring her options with David, I was about to explore opportunities that would take me 2,000 miles away from whatever mess she was creating. I scheduled the interview and spent Monday evening reviewing their projects and preparing for technical questions, feeling more energized about my career than I had in months. The video interview went flawlessly. Jennifer and the engineering team were impressed with my experience on defense satellite systems, and when I mentioned my work on the recent communication array crisis, their lead engineer practically lit up. "That's exactly the kind of problem-solving we need for our NASA contract," he said, leaning forward on the screen. "We're developing next-generation deep space communication protocols, and your background is perfect." By Thursday, they'd enhanced their original offer to $112,000 plus full relocation assistance and a signing bonus. I accepted immediately and gave my current employer 2 weeks' notice, citing a career opportunity too good to pass up. My manager was disappointed but understanding. Aerospace engineers with security clearances are always in demand, and he knew I'd been with the company long enough to earn a significant step up. While I waited for Samantha to contact me, I started methodically packing her belongings into labeled boxes. It was fascinating how much she'd transformed my space without me noticing. The expensive abstract artwork on the living room walls that I'd never really liked but tolerated because they made her happy. The kitchen filled with organic products and specialty foods I'd never chosen but had been buying for 2 years. The bathroom cluttered with skincare products that cost more than my monthly utilities. As I packed her things, I realized how much of my own personality had been slowly erased to accommodate her preferences. After 5 days of radio silence, my phone finally rang. "Lucas, we need to talk," Samantha said, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in months. "I think I made a mistake. Can we meet somewhere and work this out?" "I don't think so," I replied, sealing another box of her belongings. "I've got your stuff packed. You can coordinate with my landlord to pick it up." She was quiet for a long moment. "Lucas, please." I was confused, but I know what I want now. David wasn't what I thought he was. He's not ready for anything serious, and I realized what we had was real. Through Gary, who kept his ear to the Nashville social scene, I learned the full story later. David had apparently been thrilled to reconnect with his high school girlfriend for some nostalgic fun, but when Samantha started talking about their future together and maybe working at his brewery, he'd panicked and basically disappeared. She discovered that his innovative craft brewery was actually failing financially, and he'd been using their reunion as a distraction from his mounting business problems. The entrepreneur she'd been so impressed with was probably going to be bankrupt within 6 months. "She's been calling everyone trying to figure out where you went," Gary told me over our final pool game before I left Nashville. "Ashley said she even showed up at your work looking for you." "Good thing I already gave notice," I said, chalking my cue. "Let her look." Despite Samantha's increasingly desperate attempts to reach me, emails begging for another chance, showing up at my old workplace only to discover I'd already left, even contacting my sister in Memphis to ask if she knew where I'd gone, I successfully relocated to Seattle and started my new position at Seattle Aerospace Solutions. My apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, and I could watch the ferries crossing to Bainbridge Island while I had my morning coffee. The work was incredible, pushing the boundaries of satellite communication technology for Mars missions and deep space exploration. My new team was brilliant, full of engineers who shared my passion for solving complex problems, and they introduced me to Pacific Northwest adventures I'd never experienced. Within a month, I was sea kayaking around the San Juan Islands, learning to ski at Crystal Mountain, and exploring the Olympic Peninsula's rainforests with colleagues who became genuine friends. 3 months after my move, I was debugging code for a Mars communication relay system when a LinkedIn notification popped up on my screen. Samantha had found me through the professional network and sent a message that was both pathetic and infuriating. "Lucas, I know you're angry, but disappearing like this is cruel. We had 4 years together, and you threw it all away over one mistake." I was confused and made bad choices, but that doesn't erase everything we built. David was a fantasy, but what we had was real. I've learned from this, and I'm ready to be the partner you deserved. I know you're in Seattle now. I can move there too if that's what it takes. Please don't let pride destroy something that could still be beautiful. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset paint Elliott Bay in shades of orange and gold, cargo ships heading to and from the Pacific Rim, the Space Needle gleaming in the distance. My phone was silent, my schedule was my own, and my bank account was growing instead of being drained by someone else's expensive tastes. The woman who'd called me boring and unambitious was now begging to follow me to a city 2,000 miles away, to a life I'd built without her input or influence. The irony was perfect. I'd thought about responding to her message, maybe explaining that she hadn't destroyed 4 years over one mistake. She'd revealed her true character when she decided I wasn't good enough, then panicked when her backup plan fell through. But silence was more powerful than any explanation I could give. 6 months later, I received a promotion to Senior Satellite Systems Engineer, leading a team developing communication protocols for the Artemis lunar program. Gary visited for a long weekend, and we spent Saturday evening at a brew pub in Fremont, catching up on life. "You know she moved back in with her parents, right?" he said, sipping a local IPA. "Ashley said she's been working at some corporate event planning firm, basically back where she started before she met you." I nodded, feeling only mild curiosity about someone who'd become a stranger. "I hope she figures out what she actually wants." "You don't miss any of it?" Gary asked. "The good times, the familiarity?" I looked out at the Burke-Gilman Trail, where cyclists and joggers were enjoying the long Pacific Northwest evening. "I miss who I thought she was," I said. "But I don't miss feeling like I wasn't enough for someone who was already emotionally checked out of our relationship." The next morning, as I watched the sun rise over the Cascade Mountains from my apartment, I realized I'd never been happier. Samantha had done me the greatest favor of my life by showing me I deserved someone who chose me every day, not someone who settled for me until something shinier came along.